I remember back in the day taking on a new role in an organization, and the first 5 days were just teaching me how to use the ERP system. Not anything to do with the role, not anything to do with actually doing the job or the processes that underpinned it. Just here's how you use it. Here's the monolithic screens and the endless menus that you need to click through. I'm guessing we've seen some improvement there in terms of user experience. So hi everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Technology Boardroom. Today we're going to focus all around the latest trends in ERP. But before we get there, let's just do a few introductions. So for those that haven't had the pleasure of my company over the last few episodes, my name's Robert Smith, and I'm the Partnerships Director at Advania. So responsible for making sure all our partner relationships are working as they should to deliver value back to our clients. And Ollie, I'll ask you to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah. So Ollie, Oliver Wall, lead operations consultant within the business applications team here at Advania. So a very long title, which basically means that I look after the operational modules within business applications and specifically Business Central.
Wonderful. And Kate, if you could introduce yourself, but I've got a loaded question for you as well. So what is ERP? Over to you.
Yeah, hi, I'll introduce myself. I'm Kate Hutchinson. I'm head of Dynamics here at Advania, looking after a team of consultants implementing ERP systems and also CRM within the business. ERP, what is it? It's a software system that streamlines core business processes. And that's kind of be from finance all the way through to supply chain, procurement, manufacturing, and also services as well. And basically allows business to have a unified view of all their business activities.
So I'm able to ask the stupid questions occasionally. So how does that differ to CRM? Are they the same thing, or are they different?
No, so from a CRM point of view, that's a client relationship management tool that allows us to a business to look after quoting, marketing, and looking after kind of their sales force effectively.
Awesome. I think it's a thing that's quite relevant that they are crossing over a little bit more now than perhaps what they did in the past, ERP and CRM. And I know some of the terminology is moving away a little bit from ERP and CRM. Like Microsoft have called it Dynamics 365 for sales and Dynamics 365 Business Central. They sort of want to move away. Well, I get that impression from that sort of terminology. So it does create that sort of grey area for customers when they just go, we want to go to Dynamics. And that could be CRM, ERP. Yeah. Sort of broader
we're still caught up in that kind of CRM piece, aren't we, where we say, it's CRM, but there's lots of different facets to D365 now, and it's also crossing over into Power Platform to a point as well. So yes, we concentrate on Business Central within the team, but obviously there's a lot of other ERP solutions out there as well as us doing the CRM, as we mentioned before.
Yeah, and it's worth saying for the benefit of our listeners that if you cut us down the middle, we'd probably say Microsoft. But a lot of what we're going to talk about today is sort of applicable to, I guess, to every ERP system or to most ERP systems. So let's start with the on-premise versus cloud conversation. So, but way back in the day, I was involved in some sort of on-premise implementations of old ERP systems. But don't want to speak for you, but I'm guessing is that just not a thing anymore? Is the cloud now the only answer, or so what's the trend in that area? I guess
the most common place for it all now is in the cloud, and that's normally our recommendation. There is still some people that go on-premise. There's still some nervousness, I think, from some people around putting things in the cloud.
Okay.
Some legislative things in certain places. I mean, it's very rare that we have had a legitimate reason for a client not to go into the cloud, but there is still, and especially in some wider ERP applications, some of the slightly dated ones can only still be on-premise. Microsoft very recently sunsetted GP, but if we had a new customer who wanted to put GP in, they'd have to go on-premise. There's no cloud switch. So there is sometimes limitations, but for the most part, cloud, we're cloud first, really, unless there's a good reason not to, is our approach.
I think it probably hit home a little bit more during the pandemic as well, that you're kind of wanting to be a bit more in the cloud. You're not having to access via remote desktop and things like that. It's just more, the accessibility is much better from a cloud-based solution. So obviously the trends in that area, in terms of what we're talking about today, are definitely cloud-based. But there are some also reasons that we've talked about on another podcast, Rob, around the benefits of being cloud and why you would still potentially consider doing on-prem.
Is it sort of all in the cloud or all in on premise, or is there hybrid options available for ERP? Is that a solution we're seeing people taking advantage of?
Yeah, there is still definitely a hybrid approach. Some, given the nature of ERP implementations, that you tend to be talking to quite a lot of different systems at times, or need to rely on different systems. Some of them can only be on premise. Some of them, again, for other sort of legislative reasons, have to be on premise. So there is still that piece of and this is what I mean, it gets a bit blurred in the more modern essence what an ERP is, because an ERP might be not one system, it might be a combination of a few. Now, you want to try and sit them all. Ideally, again, we'd say if you go in cloud, it makes most benefits for everything in the cloud. There is still times though where that isn't possible, and that's not a limitation really. So you do still get some people that got some stuff on premise. I know people who before have used cloud and wanted to keep local backups of certain bits. Microsoft gives us that option that they want to still keep their backups sort of on premise, if that makes sense, locally, even though the cloud's sort of dealing with it. So it can sort of handle, I think, because I do know there's some nervousness sometimes around cloud, or at least there was, and Kate mentioned before around the pandemic. Then that's what really accelerated people's understanding of why they'd go to the cloud.
Really?
I think before that it was just like, a lot of people were like, well, especially customers were saying to me, when you go to the cloud, and they're like, well, why? What's the benefit of me going to the cloud? And then they saw overnight pretty much how the cloud enabled a lot of that. And I know, speaking from a Business Central perspective, that was when we saw a lot of people going, right, how do we get ourselves in the cloud ASAP? And, Microsoft enabled that with things like Business Central. That cloud, to get onto the cloud was very, very simple because they handle that spin up of it.
I think probably where we see the hybrid model a little bit more as well is where you've got a client who's got something maybe tailored to their needs that runs a specific business process for them. And that might be installed on a server somewhere, or it's something, physical that they might then still be using an ERP system to link to it, but it's via some integration mechanism. So that's when you might see a hybrid model though. But you'd hope that over time they've got plans to move that on-prem solution as well into another cloud-based solutions to really take the benefit of cloud with them.
It's the same journey that we've seen clients and customers go on across all the different technology areas, right? So if most organizations probably moved their sort of productivity suite first, so they moved their Exchange email, and they moved their sort of ability to access applications and SharePoint intranet services and all that sort of stuff moved to the cloud quite early. And I think the ERP piece naturally followed, but at a sort of slightly behind the trend there, I guess. And when we look at some of the other trends that we're seeing across sort of other solution areas that I'm really interested to see whether they're applicable to ERP. We've managed, I think, 10 minutes now without mentioning AI once. And I don't know if that's a good thing or if I feel a little bit dirty, but we should probably talk about AI in the context of ERP. So can sort of either or both of you just elaborate there on what is it that we're seeing from the ERP space tied in with that sort of wave of AI adoption that we're seeing at the moment?
Sure. So I think we're seeing definitely being able to kind of chat within the ERP system, ask questions of the system to try and give us answers relatively quickly, rather than having to build a report or a list view or something like that within the system itself. I think that's been limited this year, but obviously we're going to see more and more of that into 2025 for sure, where we might have been able to say, tell me how much stock I've got of ABC item. You might be able to then say, well, tell me how much stock I've got, how many orders I've got, and when I'm going to have to reorder some more. You're getting into the realms of kind of that level of detail. And specifically from a Microsoft Business Central perspective, they've introduced what we call agents, and we're starting to see those in the different modules across the solution, where it's doing things for us. So it might read an email, for example, that a customer sent in relating to a particular order something they want to order, and the system will effectively, using AI, create a quote for it with the right item, the right quantity on it, the right pricing that is related to that customer. What we are seeing on that is that there's then no automation of committing to that order effectively. It's then human intervention to say, are you happy that we've progressed with this? Is this correct? Is this what you want me to do? But I guess over time, we're going to see more and more automation of that and efficiencies, building around that process.
We just dipped our toes in. I know you spoke before, Rob, around ERP being a little bit behind sort of the cloud piece. And I wouldn't say it's behind in the AI piece as well, but it does tend to get adopted a little bit slower, I think.
Okay.
So we've definitely had our toes dipped into the AI piece. If I talk specifically around Business Central and Copilot, and Kate mentions agents there, I expect that to really rev up quite quickly like it did with the cloud. We were probably a little bit behind on the cloud, and now it's almost, you can't think of ERP without thinking cloud now. And I think it'll be the same with AI. And I think, some of the bits that will come into it will be things that will also sort of help with not necessarily just day-to-day tasks like Kate mentioned with the agents, but also in terms of like implementation. We're already starting to see some tools that are becoming apparent to us that we can use as part of implementation. So customers can implement ERP a little bit quicker by using things like AI within Business Central. It's got a lot of wizards in there already, and within BC, I think will only get enhanced further by things like AI.
I think another point around it is that we've probably seen in Dynamics NAV and Business Central over the course of numerous years where we've seen elements of forecasting what we might need to order to bring in to fulfill orders, that type of thing. We've seen that level, but what it really requires is a good level of data and the correct settings being applied. I think over time, again, we're going to see a little bit more of AI being a bit more clever with that and not needing probably the amount of data, or looking at historical trends outside of the ERP system as well as the data that's in there as well. And again, I mentioned effectively that I've read a lot of things recently where AI will, if it thinks it's got gaps in data, will try and trend the data to make it work and fit those gaps to kind of give us what it believes the answers potentially should be. So trying to get more clever around what that kind of forecasting and trends looks like to help businesses make the correct decisions more quickly.
And that's a really interesting. It's a really interesting area because obviously we've got another episode that's worth listening to around how this new wave of AI remains grounded, and how do we prevent AI hallucination, particularly in those areas where as Microsoft like to sort of turn the phrase, as you're moving into that agentic world where you're asking AI to not only help you with information, but to make decisions based off that information on your behalf. It's important that it is not hallucinating and not making the decisions based off the wrong data, let alone the wrong decision. It's important that the data that underpins it is accurate. And I think one of the sort of areas I wanted to dive into was we've talked about sort of ERP, we've talked a little bit around the AI, and I'm sure we're going to come back to that in a moment. But when you start adding in third-party applications and integrations, and you sort of explained at the start around what an ERP system does and why it's important, but that obviously has some natural jumping off points into other systems or requirements and dependencies on other sources of data. What are we seeing there? What does that look like moving forward in terms of that third-party integration piece?
Well, from a third party, so it's almost twofold. Third-party integration piece, I think ERP has historically really relied on that. That most ERP sort of say will give you a flavor of a very generic system, right? You can go down very specific vertical ERPs that exist, but the more mainstream ones tend to be a bit generic, and you then tailor them with the use of things like third parties and development bespoke, depending on the ERP you're coming from. And I think that still will always be the case. I think where it started to shift a little bit is that Microsoft has started to bring almost like a third party model into Dynamics, in the sense that they sort of go, you can cherry pick some of these apps within and that's what I said about it blurring the lines of ERP a little bit in CRM, that they'll go buy Dynamics and just cherry pick. They've got licensing benefits that you can cherry pick. I want to do a bit of field service and I want to do a bit of this. So rather than buying one big solution that has 70% of things you don't need, it's going, you can be really tailored with what you want to pick. Now, third parties still have to sit within that because Microsoft relies on that third party network, and loads of ERPs do. And I can't think of implementation we've done, Kate, that doesn't have a third party involvement in there.
Definitely.
So I don't think there's probably less even I don't know if that's so probably less third party requirements, but as the product matures, there's probably less requirements for certain third parties, but I think that'll always be something we need to include within ERP implementations.
I think that's probably the natural evolution of the systems, isn't it? That we've always seen that, even way back, you would always have third parties available that providing a tool or a piece of functionality that the ERP system at whatever point in time doesn't include. But what we're seeing, because that market now is so competitive, any partner doing third party apps, it's competitive because the solution's constantly evolving and rich, newer functionality is coming into it. And then you've got competition within, the third parties as well. So they've got to keep evolving the functionality to, not be kind of taken out by the ERP provider or already including it in their basic solution, as well as kind of functionality and trends in technology and improvements in, against each other, as well with the big ERP players, I guess. So there's definite competition there, and we're constantly seeing third-party solutions evolve and come to the fore with this is now our offer and we've now got this, and really adding to their tool set. Whereas I think previously it was like, right, we've maybe reporting tools were the key thing, and that's what they did. Then there was nothing. And then a reporting partner might then do expense management or something else in relation to it to keep adding to their functionality. So they've got to constantly evolve, because then the kind of standard ERP basic functionality will also catch up with them too.
I was going to say, just the other thing around that is the product evolving, but also, like Kate mentioned, like the landscape we're in is that, like, even when we're looking at the AI aspects within Business Central Copilot, there's some bits of that even if it's not super obvious at this point, would potentially eventually replace some of the need for some third parties. Like, we do a lot around invoice matching in ERP, and Copilot's, got some pretty scary abilities in that traditionally we were more OCR route, that could, replace that and come in the core product. So there's the third party piece around, they've got to keep moving with functionality being added to BC or to any ERP. Then there's also, like, as the technology evolves, there's less need for certain bits. Cloud created a big issue for a lot of third parties. As the wider technology, not necessarily relating to ERP, evolves, it creates, sometimes supersedes the need for some of those third parties as well.
Sustainability is also a big kind of topic at the moment, and that's where we've seen that, it's as well as on this podcast talking about ERP trends, sustainability is definitely one of those trends we're going to see. And again, businesses have got to adhere to a lot more reporting and are subject to, understanding what their sustainability policies are effectively. But again, it's a good example of third parties where we're starting to see lots of different third parties providing the relevant sustainability reports and ability to input that data into ERP, but also in the core product as well. So which one do you choose, Mr. Client? Because you've got lots and lots of different options there, all theoretically doing the same thing and covering the same legislation. But again, that's what I was trying to say about the competition of third parties. It's rife effectively, and it's against the actual core product as well.
And we touched briefly, but I'm really interested in where you see the sort of in the context of wider trends. When you talk about sort of mainstream ERP providers, those sort of fairly vanilla ones that then get customized, versus the almost pre-customized, maybe industry-specific, sort of highly niche ERP systems, where is that trend going? Are more people leaning more towards the niche or more towards the mainstream, or is it not that clear-cut?
It might not be at this moment that clear-cut, but I think the general trend is due to things like cloud and that sort of shared resource pool type of model that we move towards. It sort of creates, and the ecosystems that a lot of these, not just Microsoft, quite a lot like SAP, have got their own little ecosystem within that. When you go a bit more niche, they're not as mainstream, so they probably don't have that ecosystem that exists as much. So it's quite an obvious one for certain people to go, I'll go into the Microsoft ecosystem because I use Word, I use Excel. It works with Outlook quite well. So they'll tend to go, even if it's not specific to their industry, and it can be made specific, that still might be the more appealing approach and better long-term approach than going by a very specific ERP that's very specific to there, but then perhaps doesn't have the wider ecosystem that can support it around the edges, or perhaps not within a technology stack as rich in vein as like an SAP or a Microsoft, where they can go, right, if your data's in the cloud of Microsoft, it's in the cloud of Microsoft. Do you know what I mean? You sort of can hang your hat on that, whereas some of these other smaller ones might not be able to offer that same sort of infrastructure.
I think where we've come a long way from kind of back in the day when me and Oliver will have been implementing on-prem NAV as well, and it would have been definitely, well, what do you want? Because we can just develop it as per what you want. And we were I probably told the story before, and Oliver's definitely heard it, where I'll say, we had developers almost developing in demos to show the client that we could provide exactly what they needed, and a field on the left-hand side here and a pop-up button here. If they needed it, we could do whatever they wanted, and we would. We've definitely shifted away and seen the trend, shift away from that really bespoke ERP system and solution. And because the reality is that it's harder to support those, and the client then realizes that they've now got an ERP system that's so niche to them that it's hard for anybody else to support, hard for them to move, hard for them to upgrade, hard for them to move along. So when we're looking at cloud-based solutions now, that's why, again, you'd go back to the third party, you'd put a more minor extension on, and, you're going to be upgraded on a 6-monthly cycle if you're using anything Microsoft related, and you're going to get all that enriched functionality because you've not got all that really heavy, bespoke, developed piece on there. And I think actually clients' trends and mindset is different to that as well. We get a lot of clients coming to us now saying, I want standard, you tell us what it can do, and we'll try and work our processes around how the system will work, because it's easier for them. It's easier for us to implement it. It de-risks the whole project. It makes it more streamlined for them moving forward. Future-proofs it, exactly that. So although we still would develop it, only if we needed to, nothing like we were doing 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that I think the clients are sometimes driving that with us now, which is a massive shift. And the clients going, we want to be, I think we've gone through the sort of stage of, or the era of, access databases. People could create whatever they wanted and creating these like bespoke monsters, and they've lived through that pain. And now they're coming out the other end, and most customers are going, right, we want to move away from this bespokeness we've got, which is, person X left our business, no one knows how this works, person what, and let's move to a standard process so that no matter what happens, it's standard and we can go to anyone we want and understand what this core product does. And also now it's cloud-based, as Kate alluded to. As this product evolves, you're going to benefit from it. In the past, it was a very snapshot in time, your system you got built. It was built and it stayed like that until you chose to do anything with it. Whereas now, every 6 months, most of the ERPs are going, some great new functionalities, new technologies emerging like AI. And if you're in the cloud and you're as standard as possible, you're going to fit into that a lot easier than if you've had loads of stuff built around it to make your standardized implementation almost a very unique one to you.
It's almost a devil's advocate view then, just to get your thoughts. How much is that forced upon end customers and clients? So it on paper, it sounds great. New functionality every 6 months, new services turning on and lighting up. What if I don't want that? What if I don't want that change to be forced upon me? I like my system. I want to keep it 3 years, 5 years, whatever. Please stop messing with it. What are we seeing there? Is that still a concern? Because I know it was at one point in other cloud services. How is that sort of landing in ERP at the moment?
I think similar. I think a lot of it comes from Microsoft and the plain saying, just trust us. Like we've had, communications from Microsoft saying, look, we'll never do anything breaking and everything will come in a very staggered process. Like we get, as partners, notice, I don't know the exact amount of releases, but it's a fair few releases before that something's going to be like slowly depreciated or something's going to be changed. I can't think of a time where they brought something in functionality wise that said you can no longer use something that's got this functionality and they've not given us and here's quite an easy way to move to the new functionality though. And again, they normally say you turn it on, that experience on when you want it, but then you're going to be forced, eventually you will be forced onto it. And that's, there's the pros and cons of being on this, like shared ERP platform in the cloud. Huge benefits to it in terms of the fact that you never have to bother with your infrastructure and any of that. But at the same time, you are on a shared infrastructure. So Microsoft can't let you stay on an old version forever. So they will eventually say, look, this is what you signed up for. You signed up to a subscription. This product's going to evolve for the better. There might be some times where you go, slightly preferred this interface before, but they're never going to do anything that's going to fundamentally go, as a business, right, we can no longer work then. If you're using standard products, they're never going to remove functionality without giving us so much warning of where to go instead. So that settles that nervousness, I think, with people. And we've had to go on that journey with customers sometimes and say, look, just trust us. Like Microsoft have told us this. It's not going to, the changes are only going to be beneficial. Or if there's anything that isn't going to be beneficial, Microsoft's going to work with us to get you through that. But we're probably still at the beginning of that.
I think some of the worst problems, but I'll kind of use it as a very loose sense of the word, has been when Microsoft had tried to change menus and almost look and feel. So it doesn't change that much. But if a field moves, a posting button, yeah, exactly, or something of that ilk, then we will get clients going, this button that I literally use every day, why have they put it over there? And that's more of a frustration actually than some of the bigger pieces of functionality potentially coming in, because like Ollie says, you've got options to potentially turn it off or not use it, or phased approach to kind of, getting started with that area. So it's more, usability, user experience on a day-to-day basis, that if they change something fundamental, that's tricky.
Microsoft always used to refer to them, I don't know if they still do, as impactful and non-impactful changes. And so sometimes what they deemed, as you say, non-impactful, this definitely won't cause anyone a problem, or that button's changed colour, or it's now called start instead of let's go, or whatever.
Exactly,
the end of the world for some people.
And I think we had that early doors, didn't we? Because Microsoft were getting, specifically, I'm talking Business Central here, very specific ERP, but I'm sure it's, other ERP systems as well, that, Microsoft started in a particular vein with Business Central, and we had quite a few logos to start with as well, never mind, buttons and menu, views. But I think that's definitely settled down. But the very first early versions of it, there were menu changes left, right, and centre, and it took us some getting used to. Never mind the client on a day-to-day basis.
It gets underestimated. Sometimes visual and sort of interface changes get underestimated in terms of the impact they have. They are to some people functional changes. You're right, like we went through a very rapid, at the beginning, I'd say in the first 2 years, it went through quite a rapid change in terms purely from a how it looked point of view.
Absolutely,
so the product itself didn't change too much, but even like Kate said, as consultants, we're going to the product sometimes going, how do we do this again? It's exactly the same product, just they changed the search bar from a light bulb and stuff like that, and even that we were all going, right, where do we get about?
And so used to it, don't you? So used to it, almost muscle memory of I do it this way, and then if that changes, it can be jarring. But so we talked a little bit about sort of reporting just a few minutes ago. Obviously, one of the I guess the key capabilities of an ERP system, or one of the sort of defining characteristics of it, is it's got access to a huge amount of data about a huge amount of stuff. What are we seeing from a trending perspective in terms of utilizing that data, either through reporting or analytics, or what sort of the direction of travel there?
I'm going to take that from a very trend of like what we've seen in terms of implementing ERP over the last few years, because I think, again, if I talk back in the day, we would implement ERP and reporting would come later. And, you're missing a trick almost.
Afterthought.
That way down. It's an absolute afterthought. We didn't necessarily have a lot of reporting tools at our disposal. So you're basically left with what's within the ERP system that I can use for reporting. So it was kind of left to, well, we'll put all this data in, we'll make sure you can carry out all your business processes, and then we'll see what falls out at the end of it. And the standard reports will be there, but then we'll work out what else you might need. Whereas I would say now there's definitely a trend towards, right, what do you actually want to get out of it? What's the reporting mindset? What are you looking for? Are you looking for forecasting? Are you looking for trends? Do you want to use Power BI? What kind of reporting is it? Who are you reporting to? What business decisions do you need to make off the data that you're putting through this ERP system effectively? So we almost want to start there. And we also like to run almost separate reporting projects alongside the implementation of ERP, so it gets the thought process that it deserves and the dedication that it deserves. And we're obviously seeing, AI trends that are going to move forward, Rob, and, that's going to help that, efficiency of reporting. Like I said before, we can just ask it a question now by typing a simple sentence, or probably using voice as well now in some capacity, and it will give us a quick answer. I don't have to write a full report to get the one thing that I need to do in Excel that I might have had to do, again, 10 years ago.
And I think as well, within the application itself, sort of touch what Kate said there as well, reporting wasn't, especially not in my experience in the beginning, it was something you sort of suggested to clients, especially even when Power BI first came a thing. It was one of those things we were like suggesting to clients. They couldn't really see the benefit. Some could, but some couldn't necessarily see the benefit of why do they need that. And then it's become almost, we've had some projects that we've started by going, what are the reports they want to get out of the system to then help design the system. Reports have become that important. But, a lot of these, Power BI is the big one, obviously. That is the one that, and Business Central and a lot of these cloud-based ERPs will talk to reporting tools so easily. That's only going to expand with the use of things like AI, like Kate said, just free type. And there's already a area within Business Central where you can free type it to create you analysis views in quite a simplistic way, but say like sort my customers by region, it goes and does it for you. So there'll be a lot of, I think, reporting coming with inside the ERP, which again blurs the lines of where does the ERP cross and stop. And some of that you can embed Power BI into Business Central, which again, to some customers, they don't necessarily know they're using reporting tools in that instance if they can just view it all within their one system. But I definitely think reporting has become, in the last 5 years, really a big hot topic, mainly because of the data. People have started to realize the value of their data. So not just necessarily for reporting on, but Kate alluded to before around sort of like checking trends, forecasting. AI will be invaluable in that because it'll be able to do things with that data that no human would be able to do, right? So that's going to give you such a competitive advantage. And that's what customers are starting to clock onto. They're going, right, if I'm implementing ERP today, what do I need to think about to make sure that this data, when AI and that becomes strong enough, is ready in a situation where I can consume that data and do stuff with it as I need to.
Probably the shift as well in terms of almost how you log onto an ERP system as well. So, we go into Business Central now, or a lot of other ERP systems will be the same, and we're faced with custom dashboards for what my role is. So what's the date? That's the first thing I see, like probably before might have taken me to a list of customers or just a menu screen that I can choose where I want to go. Now I'm straight away into Power BI dashboards and custom dashboards for my role in the organization. What do I need to see on a daily basis? And the quick tips to kind of get to like the main information that I need to see.
It's a great segue as well into sort of the trends that we're seeing in user experience across ERP systems. Because I think on a previous episode we had a chat around some fairly inflammatory comments that we'd seen on the internet where people were saying, well, ERP is dead. ERP and CRM, they don't matter anymore. AI is just going to do all of that for you. Now, I happen to not quite prescribe to that view of the world. But it's a bit about dashboarding, and the sort of first place you land when you go into these systems is really important, because I again show my age a little bit, but I remember back in the day taking on a new role in an organization, and the first 5 days were just teaching me how to use the ERP system. Not anything to do with the role, not anything to do with actually doing the job or the processes that underpinned it. Just here's how you use it. Here's the monolithic screens and the endless menus that you need to click through. I'm guessing we've seen some improvement there in terms of user experience. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, just tailoring roles and screens and what people need access to. I've seen it sometimes where we've done implementations where you've got people in warehouses literally need to do or see almost one option in terms of receiving goods in, shipping them out, and they've literally got 2 options on their front screen and a list view of what stock items they need to be viewing on a daily basis, and that's their ERP system. That's the extent of what they need to do. But we definitely have seen that a lot more in terms of the roles and use of that, Ollie, haven't we?
Yeah, and I think if you were to look historically at a lot of the business applications around things like ERP, their interfaces were still very dated, even when sort of more mainstream applications like your Office apps and stuff like that were looking a little bit more modern. So I know one thing, and it does come with pain points. One of the big things with Microsoft changing Business Central's interface was to align it to look a little bit more like what you'd expect if you're using Outlook. You've got ribbons across the top. And so when you go into a lot of these applications now, you don't have to be trained in the interface as much. You've not got to learn as much. Of course, there's still an element of, we always do like a intro to the ERP session, but that tends to be a lot shorter now than what it used to be in the past, because we're not teaching people that they've got to type in shortcuts or anything like that to get to things. It's like very much clear. Most people, we've got customers that go in and have a play in Business Central, have been trained and pretty much work out how to get about it on their own now. And that's the strength of creating an interface. You access it via the web, so when you access Outlook, all that. So all of that's really familiar. So a lot of it's familiarization. Rather than doing anything too out there, they've gone, let's make ERP sit within the same realm as like the apps people are using every day. Outlook, Excel, make them look like that, so the adoptions are moving between them is a lot easier.
I think that's another good segue into another piece around, user experience. We're definitely seeing where we've got UK businesses coming to us to implement an ERP solution, but they've got users abroad. So we've got the ability to put language packs on there for them so that their ERP solution is in the language that they need to utilise. But also legislative-wise as well, we can put localization packs on there. So we're adhering to legislation in other countries, and we're definitely implementing more and more of that within Advania, because we've got, a lot of UK companies that they're then trading, they've got companies in the EU who they're trading with. So we're seeing lots more of that functionality come to the fore.
I guess that all being centrally managed makes it really easy for the organization to apply it. And for those end users, they get access to the content they need in the language they need it to be, and with the safety rails, I guess, around it in terms of that legislation piece as well, to make sure that they're not doing anything unintentionally nefarious where they're off in the Wild West, which is interesting. We've talked quite a lot today around sort of almost specific ERP trends. And I'm going to put you both on the spot now, so be ready. So what is sort of the most important trend? Maybe something we haven't talked about, maybe it's something we have. What do you think is the biggest trend, or going to provide the biggest shake-up to the ERP world over the next 12, 18 months or beyond?
For me, and I'm probably going to steal the most obvious one, but it is AI. We can't avoid it.
Can't avoid it.
We can't avoid it. But I just think we saw. I think it's going to be the biggest shift we've seen since cloud. Like, we saw a massive shift. I almost speak in the office the other day with a colleague saying we almost couldn't imagine when people started talking about cloud how that would have affected ERP, and it's affected it so much. So much of how ERP is implemented now is way different than what we could ever have imagined pre-cloud. And I think we're going on a similar trajectory with AI. I think there's going to be some bits of AI that will help us that we can't even comprehend now, because it's going to be so different to how we do things in terms of, we've spoke before around like the advantages of AI, and we're talking a little bit hypothetically here, but it's not outside the realms of what we're seeing in other areas of AI. But in terms of competitive advantage you could get from utilizing AI within an ERP, I think is almost the biggest, or one of the biggest areas where you could see that competitive advantage. Right? If you've got AI that can tell you trends on your data and give you insights that is, so out there that you couldn't replace that with 5-10 people look at that data. Only AI can give you that. By moving to a system with AI, it could give you a market and competitive advantage. Now that's huge. In ERP in the past, you've said, like, if you're using a warehousing module in Business Central, it'll help you do this quicker, or it'll give you efficiencies. This might give you something that you cannot get without using AI. And for me, that's where I think we'll end up going. There'll be certain things we'll be saying to customers, look, you will not be able to get this, or you will not be able to replicate what AI is going to give you unless you move to AI. And I think that'll cause a big rush of people, because that'll create competitive advantages that people want to get left behind with. I think it'll create a big rush then for people to go, how are we making sure? And I think that'll happen very quickly. I think cloud happened quickly. I think with AI, it's going to be even quicker. We're seeing already, aren't we, that reality, how long ago was it we really first heard the word Copilot? It wasn't much more than 18 months ago. Now it's everywhere, right? Everyone's talking about AI and ChatGPT and all this. So I think it's going to have a real acceleration through ERP. So sorry, Kate, I've probably stolen the most.
You have stolen it, but I'll go completely off piece and talk about my favourite subject, and not necessarily around kind of ERP and technology as such, but actually because we're seeing obviously most people move to cloud now from an ERP perspective, then what we need to do and what clients need to do is do that with a partner who's going to put in a really good system for them, because effectively that system is going to last them a long time, because we talked about the upgrades that they're getting every 6 months and so on. So it's important that we're when you're implementing ERP, we're following a really good process of project methodology, that we're de-risking the projects, throughout that piece, and that we're trusted effectively between us as the partner and the client, effectively getting them to the best ERP solution at the end of the project that they could possibly get to. And then from there, effectively, once you've got that really good foundation of a really good solid ERP implementation, you're then in a massively great position to be able to invest in that, to move forward with the additional functionality that you're going to get. So I think, the trend of really kind of put time into doing that really good cloud ERP implementation, because you're going to reap the benefits of that, downstream.
Yeah, I heard that described by someone as like you're almost investing into a technology stack now rather than just a technology. So if you're going, right, we're going with Business Central, it's almost so you can go, right, from day one, it's Business Central. Day 100, it might be Business Central, whilst we're utilizing Power BI a bit better, and we're going to implement some of CRM, because you wouldn't ever have to, like Kate said, it's your Microsoft, you loved the term, didn't they? Your last ever upgrade. They kept saying, like, this is your last ever upgrade.
Your last ever upgrade,
you're just going to be on it then forever type thing. And that is genuinely the mindset people have got now that if they're going to put this big outlay on, they won't necessarily need to do that again. So what else are they going to then do? And it gives them a wider possibilities. In the past, some companies would go, we'd never be able to afford to implement ERP and then implement a CRM system. And then, whereas now they're going, well, if we only have to do this once, and in 5 years' time, instead of upgrading, why don't we look at how we can use CRM or how we can use field service or how we could use this application alongside it?
You're almost investing in implementing now, but you're investing in future functionality that you don't actually know about yet.
3 years time, 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, brilliant. So I've really enjoyed that conversation. I think it's been really interesting. It's a topic I definitely want to know more about, and I'm sure we'll have some more episodes on the ERP solutions in the future. Thank you both for your time as always, and thank you everybody for listening and watching, and we hope to see you next time on the next episode of the Technology Boardroom. Thank you.